stayed at a place in Havre de Grace, Maryland, which was right outside of Aberdeen Proving Ground, where I got my basic officer training to become an ordnance officer. And it was a learning experience, becoming an officer and learning how to function in that capacity. And that was good. And I met a couple of wonderful friends. Met them right off the bat. One was Wallace O'Peace. Wallace O'Peace stands 6'6". He's a fantastic person, a lot of personality. Was a history major in school, had his master's degree, and was a first lieutenant. We were all there as trainees, but he was a first lieutenant, so he was the ranking guy. Very interesting, because he was kind of liberal, and his opinions, I thought maybe he would be a conscientious objector from the way that he talked, that sort of thing. But he was an officer, and he was doing it. Now, as I look back, he was very level-headed and handled it very well with a great sense of humor, which we really got to know. Mm-hmm. But he was a great friend to us. And so I met him right off the bat. And we met in a line going into a dining in, which is a formal sort of occasion that the officers do all over the world, and it's a very formal dinner. And anyway, we were standing there, and he and Bruce Jones were in line ahead of me, and they were saying how awful things were at the food at the officers' club, and the officers' mess just was not very sharp. And then I told them what Elizabeth had fixed for me for dinner. And Wallace looked at me and he said, "I hate you." And I said, "You don't hate me enough. You've got to come have dinner with us, and then you'll really know what you've missed." He said, "I accept." And so he said, "Okay." So we set it up. Told Elizabeth, who could cook anything from anything, fixed a sumptuous dinner, and Bruce and Wallace came over, and that started a wonderful friendship which goes to this day. And that's, I guess, more than 50 years later. And we had a wonderful time. It was just outstanding. He was into opera. He was a real opera pro. He just loved it and knew it.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, Elizabeth loved opera. Mm-hmm. And then we just got along very well. He was so smart and so sharp and so fun, and he thoroughly enjoyed us. And I used Elizabeth as my trophy. She was my trophy wife. She could do anything, be anything, and she was mama in the biggest sense of the term. And he was an African American who has spent his life until now championing the cause of African Americans rising to the top, being educated, erudite, smart, sharp, and together. He later became a professor and got a doctor's degree and 2 more master's degrees.
Wow!
At Wayne University in Detroit. And it's Wayne County, and they have a university, and he was a professor there. Later on, he became in charge of the professional guild there for all the professors at the university. And he was a counselor and a teacher and did wonderful things. We had a lot of fun, and he was very sharp. But there he was, and as a junior officer, but a senior to me all the time, and an absolute character. And he appreciated Elizabeth tremendously. So we met every week for the rest of the time that we were in America before he went to Vietnam and I went to Korea. We did our Aberdeen Proving Ground experience. Then we were sent to our next Army post to go into advanced training. And that for both Wallace and me and Bruce Jones was Fort Lee, Virginia. So we went to Fort Lee, Virginia, and that was beautiful. It was a different entire experience. There's a huge difference between just living in Maryland and living in Virginia. Virginia was the Old South. We were in Petersburg, which is where Fort Sill is, which is the last big battle of the Confederate insurrection against the United States of America, and had all kinds of stuff. There was lots of history. We went to lots of history things together. But every week, we would go to Wallace. We'd be with Wallace O'Peace, having opera lessons, and he'd be with us. We went through school, and we got assigned, and my assignment was to be in charge of First Army's newspaper there at Fort Lee. So I was in charge of it. That was mine, and command information and on the post. So I had me, then my boss was Major Brady, who was the information officer and public affairs man for a two-star general, and then the two-star general. So my chain of command was two. Major General, my major, me. That was it. That was my line of command, which was an interesting thing. All through the military, I had a short run between me and a general, which isn't usual, but it was an interesting experience. So anyway, we had a wonderful time there, and we developed really great friendships. And then the time came and I was very involved in it. We were all very involved in the church. We had a great ward. We did lots of wonderful things. The people were very wonderful. We were very active, of course. The church is our life and has always been our life. It's always been because the Lord protected us, blessed us, and helped us. If he had not really done wonderful things, I never could have graduated from the university. Most people in our circumstance would have ground out. They'd have not made it through. They'd have dropped out. Things would have been way too hard. But the Lord blessed us with special blessings as we went. Little miracles, tender mercies, all kinds of things that happened where we could get through, and we got through just safely. And the same thing happened in the military. Major Brady, who was my commanding officer just over me, had served a while there in Dugway Proving Ground in Utah because he was a chemical corps officer. And he met the church there, and he met people who are his employees who were members of the church, and he was very impressed positively. And we had a great friendship, he and I. And he had a brother who was a general in the Pentagon. And one day, as I came into the office, the enlisted man said, Major Brady's talking with his brother in the Pentagon, and he's trying to help you. And he was on with his brother for hours. And when he got through, he called me into his office, and he said, Lieutenant McCopper, I'd like to inform you you're not going to Vietnam. You're going to Korea. I said, I wish. He said, no, I'm informing you of facts. Already there. Your orders are cut, and they will come down to you. I said, what? And he said, my brother is a general in the Pentagon, and I called him up and went to bat for you, and he has worked all the way through the line, and you have your orders. They'll come down, and instead of going to Vietnam, you'll go to Korea. I said, I cannot thank you enough. He said, it's just wonderful. And he and I were great friends. He taught me a lot, and just a wonderful man. He was just super. And so when the time came, and Wallace O'Peace told us all many times, all of you will go somewhere else. I will go to Vietnam, and there I will die. And one week, he was very morose. He was not his normal, happy, joking self. He was very quiet and kind of glum, trying his best. And finally I said, Wallace, what's going on? He said, what do you mean, what's going on? Everything's good. He said, no. What's going on? He said, I've got my orders. I said, what are the orders? He said, I told you what they would be. He said, I'm going to Vietnam, and I will die. And he did. But he didn't die. But he went to Vietnam, and always with his bravado and silliness and stuff, he gave reports that he was spending all his time in Cam Ranh Bay and that it was never going anywhere, and he just worked at a desk and just enjoyed, regular and all that stuff. It was 25 years after we had come back from the military that he sent me a little thing and said, by the way, Howard, I just got presented. We had a ceremony and I got presented with the Bronze Star. I said, what? He said, I got the Bronze Star. I said, you got the Bronze Star. Wallace, I thought you told us you never left Cam Ranh Bay. He said, well, I never wanted to. I said, you didn't get that at Cam Ranh Bay. You got that on a convoy out there being shelled at. He said, but I was screaming the whole time. I said, yeah, I know, Wallace. You were saying, squad left, move up on the right. I need more firepower down on. Yeah, that's what you were screaming. I know very well what you were doing. And so it was. And so he was our military hero. The only war hero in our group was the one that we thought would probably be just one step up from a conscientious objector. He said, I never did really like war. I just happened to be there. Of course, he happened to be there, and he was our one hero in our group. And he came back and did wonderful things. And we talk now, and he helped me out a great deal. Well, he still calls me. We still talk. And he cheers me up when he talks. He has a great sense of humor, and it's just a lot of fun. And when Elizabeth died, he called me up, and he cheered me up as it went. He made it was something I could live with, and he could find bright sides of things, and he could keep us entertained, and he could joke on stuff that was fun and erudite and just exciting. And his job with the university and the students, he was a counselor, and it lifted my spirits. He really helped me out, and he's always been there. And he was a feature in our home when he was there, and he and his wife came and visited us a couple of times in Washington.
I remember meeting him once, but I don't remember much because I was too young to be able to really get to know him, if you know what I mean. But he seemed like a wonderful guy. He had a great presence, if I remember right.
Yeah, he did, and he just did wonderful things. We were always at his debt. One of the greatest things we had, because Elizabeth loved opera. As a girl, they played opera on the radio on Saturday mornings. And Laprile, over the objections of the other girls, said, Elizabeth likes the opera. We will hear the opera on Saturday morning every time, every week, so Elizabeth can hear her opera. And so she did. And when we went there and Wallace was deep into opera and gave us opera lessons, then he said to us, we're going up to the Met in New York to Madame Butterfly. And Elizabeth said, Wallace, I'd love to go, but we can't afford that. He said, and who asked you to afford something? Did I mention money? I said, I'm taking you to the opera. I'm taking you to the opera, Elizabeth. And she was so excited she couldn't sleep the night before we went. It was a wonderful trip up there. We went to New York. We went up the Empire State Building most of the way. We went to the opera. The opera was fabulous. It was just everything you could ever hope it to be. It was dramatic and musical and fun and everything else. And then we got in the car and drove back to Virginia. It was very late at night when we came back. And we dropped him off in Washington, D.C. And he went off into the Washington, D.C. where he had friends. And because we were so crammed in that car. And then we went on back down, and that was something I've remembered all my life. And to Elizabeth, it was a great joy. And Wallace and I chat about it often. Just how excited she was and how wonderful it was. And the opera lessons. I was given a job as in charge of the newspaper there at Fort Lee, Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And Wallace O'Peace, when we graduated from the quartermaster school, we got our assignments. And so I asked him what his assignment. We were all together, Elizabeth, Wallace, and I. I said, well, what's your assignment? He said, I'm going to a motor pool out there at Camp Pickett in Blackstone, Virginia. It's nothing but nature and trees and stuff I don't even understand. Deer and all kinds of awful things. And I'm going to be there in a motor pool where they do with engines and grease and I don't know. I guess this is I'm doing penance for something. He said, however, I've got an article and I'm trying to get it. I'd like to get it into our Post newspaper, The Traveler. That's a special editorial on opera. Do you think any way I can get it? I said, I can guarantee that it'll get in. He said, what? He said, I will guarantee that will get in the newspaper. He said, how can you do that? I said, well, that's my newspaper. That's my assignment. They gave me the newspaper to run. What? What do you know about newspapers? I said, I've taken one all the time and I read it. He said, this is ridiculous. He said, what did you do before you came in the military? I said, well, I worked for several years in a diesel overhaul machine shop, taking care of huge engines and doing all kinds of stuff, machinery and grease and engine parts and all that stuff. And he looked at me and he said, Army intelligence is to intelligence as Army music is to music. And so there he was. So we did, of course, print his stuff when he sent it over. And I had a newspaper. What I really had was Ray Nywick, who was a private first class and had been an editor for the Rochester Review in New York and a staff photographer for the New York Mets. That's rather a good photographer to be that. And that was his job, and he did wonderful photography for us. And he ran the newspaper as a private. I backed him. He took care of me. That's kind of how he did the military. And it was wonderful. And we got the award as the best newspaper in First Army.
There you go.
And so that was just one of those fun things. And it was good. And I had lots of opportunities to go around and be with public affairs, which is my church job now and has been for a long time. So it's kind of fun training for that. You never know what's going to come.